the president announced that he is hiking the Pentagon budget from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. Just announced that. Why? Well, it's hard to know without asking him. He'll explain. But big picture, obviously, that's the kind of budget that a country that anticipates a global or regional war. So how do you position yourself for that? Well, you look at a map and you ask the most basic questions. What areas do I want to control? Where are the trade routes? Who's got the resources? Who do I share a language with? Who do I share a common history with? Who do I share a civilization with? And you proceed on that basis, and you try and shore up your team, the allies, against the other team, the Axis or whatever. But you think soberly about how the world is going to cleave once this begins. And if you were to do that for about, 25 or 30 seconds, you would arrive at the most obvious conclusion of all, which is the United States has to have a relationship with Russia in order to survive anything like that. And the reason is really simple: scale and resources. Russia is the largest country in the world. It has the most resources in the world. That means energy, oil and gas. It means all kinds of minerals. It means gold. And in a world where the US dollar is probably not going to be as powerful as it once was, it's already declining in value, massive incentive for other countries to get off the dollar to trade in energy in other currencies. You need to think about gold. And people are thinking about gold. And by the way, if you are wondering whether volatility is coming up, look at silver prices, look at gold prices over the last year. Investors understand this is a new time. You need to be aligned with Russia. And the number one thing you can't do, Donald Trump has said this many times over the years, is allow Russia and China to become a bloc, because if you do, then you are facing off against the majority of the world's population, the biggest population bloc in the world, the biggest land mass in the world, and the biggest economy in the world, if you combine those two. So you can't do that. And it's pretty clear that the last administration intentionally drove Russia into an alliance with China, which they now have. Just to be really clear, just to bottom line it, if Donald Trump wants to commit one act as president that will secure him a place in history forever as a hero, it would be to bring Russia back into alliance with the United States. Oh, Russia's bad. Right. Kind of hard to say that after Venezuela. And it's tiresome anyway. No, Russia is not bad or good. Russia is essential to the United States. We cannot survive a global conflict if Russia and China are aligned against us. Period. And it couldn't be more simple, and it shouldn't be very hard at this point to make that deal. There's no reason to pay any attention to the unelected leader of Ukraine. Now, the obstacle in the way is not geostrategic. There is no argument for continuing a proxy war, which is what it is. United States versus Russia. We've been at war for 4 years. All of us are pretending we're not. We are. There's no reason to continue that on the basis of America's national interest. That is not in our interest, and it never has been in our interest. And by the way, Russia is a Christian country, a remarkable country, a very serious country that we have a lot in common with, whether you like it or not. Oh, he's bad. Okay, stop. We need Russia. And the only reason we are not in alliance with Russia is because the foreign policy establishment in the United States, the weapons manufacturers, and particularly the neocons, believe that they somehow own Russia or want to retake Russia or something, and Putin is in the way. He kicked out the oligarchs. That was gravely offensive to the American finance establishment and to the American foreign policy establishment, and acted on his own country's behalf. Whatever. None of that even matters at this point. Ignore these people. He has to be our enemy? No. If Putin is our enemy, if Russia is our enemy, we cannot survive a global conflict. Sorry. And if you think we can, tell us how. With the help of NATO, which, by the way, is now done. NATO is done. Once the United States takes Greenland, which is owned by a fellow NATO member, what will be the rationale for keeping NATO? The whole illusion has shattered in the past 4 days. None of this is real, and now everyone admits it's not real, so it's time to start thinking about the next step. The third thing to remember is that a functioning empire benefits from the empire. Rome, at its height, was a gleaming, clean, prosperous city. Rome benefited. In the end, of course, it was destroyed by its empire. It was invaded by the people it had subdued, and that is ultimately the fate of all empires, all of them. London is filled with former colonial subjects. That's what that is. And that will happen to every empire. But in the meantime, the point is to help the seat of empire. And so if you can't fix Baltimore, you don't really have a shot of making Caracas functional. And so as you administer this empire, you need to remember the point of this is your own country, making your own country more prosperous, but also stable and cleaner and better for its own citizens. It can't just be, oh, Paul Singer gets rich, therefore it's a good thing. No, no, no. All Americans, not just Paul Singer, have to benefit from this. And they can, and they absolutely can. And the president, to his great credit, has made a huge effort to clean up American cities. Washington, D.C., for example. People mocked him for sending the National Guard in. Washington is safer. It's just a fact. He did that. The last guy didn't do that. Trump did that. Keep doing that. Remember, an empire should be impressive. Not just its satellites or its colonies, but the mother country should be impressive. And ours can be. It is inherently. But the point of this is to help us. And the last thing to remember about being an empire is that it can corrupt you. And this is the fate, ultimately, of all empires. They are corrupted by the imperial project, and they become coarser. As Rome grew, as its territory grew, so did the number of people dying in Circus Maximus. So that does happen over time, but fight back against it. You want to retain the fundamental decency of your country, even as you expand, as you take Greenland and take Venezuela or wherever else we're going. You need to remember we are decent people, and we're going to continue to live as though we are, with dignity. You are not going to become hardened by the violence that you sometimes commit on other populations. And that is really difficult to maintain. And you see this even in Washington. Americans have to remember that the point of this exercise is to secure the homeland and everything good about it. And one of the very best things about the United States is the regard that Americans have for human life and for dogs. There's a sweetness and a sentimentality to Americans that would be sad as hell if we lost. Don't allow the killing that takes place overseas to make you think it's okay for the U.S. government to treat you that way. So the first thing you want to do, and Trump has said this a million times before he became president, the first thing you want to do is make sure that Russia and China don't align, because all of a sudden there's a bloc much more powerful than you in charge of the world, and you do their bidding, which is going to happen at this rate.
But right now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor.
And so to make Russia the enemy, when there's absolutely no reason to make Russia the enemy at all, we did it on purpose. We provoked Russia into invading eastern Ukraine by moving NATO eastward, obviously.
Right.
They told us this a million times. We did it on purpose. Why? What would be the point of that? Well, if you're China, this is the one thing you want. You want the United States to pivot against Russia. What you don't want is a bloc from Mongolia West against you. You don't want that. That's the one thing you don't want. And they achieved it through the willing or unwitting participation, collaboration of American leaders. And that's the story. It's not about Zelensky stealing money or whatever. Okay, yeah, got it. That's all true, by the way, but that's not what this is about. This is about the contest between the United States and China. I don't think we need to win that, but I would like a sphere of influence where we can make Western decisions and avoid collective punishment, for example, and preserve our system without China being in charge of everything. Well, but once you take Russia and move it into China's camp, you're done. And that's exactly what Lindsey Graham and his friends have done. I mean, it's not my job to defend Putin, and in fact, I'm not defending him. I'm just noting what is true, which is that Putin is the most moderate leader you're going to get in Russia, which is to say he's the most pro-Western leader you're going to get in Russia, the least authoritarian leader you're going to get in Russia, and he's not an absolute leader. I mean, he rules a coalition, which is not public, but it's the obvious stakeholders in Russian society: FSB, military, business.
Right.
And there is a dance that goes on all the time. He's a very capable politician, but he's not an absolute monarch. There are no absolute monarchs in this world, period. That's not the way it actually works. So Russia is being led by a guy who asked to join NATO in 2001. He asked to join NATO, and we kept him out. And the question is why? Why do we want to be at war with Russia? We clearly do. And I think big picture, with the vantage of like 100 years from now, you will see we are doing the bidding of China. Our leaders are doing the bidding of China, because if Western Europe, the Americas, and Russia are roughly on one team, aligned at least in trade, and also in values, it's a Christian country. One of the reasons they hate it so much, main reason they hate it so much. But if they're all aligned, then that's balance in the world. That's Iran, Iraq, okay? And we can kind of probably live with that peacefully. But if you, again, align Russia with China, there's no balance. We lose, and we're going to be ordered around by our Chinese masters, who don't respect the things that we love the most about the United States. It's natural resources, it's nature, the sort of gentle way we deal with each other, the First Amendment, all that is gone. So that's our future, because of people like Lindsey Graham, and there are a lot of them. This disaster has many authors, but
Correct.
That's what's my view. That's what's actually happening. And, Russians are not Americans. They're Europeans, but they're also part Mongol, and they think a little bit differently. The culture is recognizable. You've been there. It's an amazing country. And I'm not required to pretend it's not, because I've been there a few times. It is. But they think differently, and there's a seriousness about them that is not American at all. I'm not a very serious person. I'm from California. Like, everything's kind of a joke to me. That's not the Russian perspective at all. They're serious, and they're history-minded, they're math-minded, and they feel that they're in a really consequential fight for the future of their country. So it's like, there's not a lot of about women when you're, at least with me, with Putin, but he's a serious guy who feels the burden of his office. I mean, leave the United States, leave Western Europe, as I often do, because I think the world is super interesting and important, and ask people what they think of Putin. And, he's like the most loved leader in the world. After Modi, I think, is number one. But Putin's right there with the rest of the world. Why is that? Because Russia was in terrible shape in 2000, terrible shape. Just life expectancy alone was, sub-Western. And now it's much, much stronger. And Putin deserves a lot of the credit for that. And so in the end, leaders are judged by the job they do for their people. That's how we measure success in leadership. You're a father, how are your kids? You're an officer, how are your men? You're a president, how's your country? It's super simple. It's not complicated. Victoria Nuland doesn't get to design the measure of leadership in a foreign country. The people who live in that country do. And he's done a pretty darn good job, and the rest of the world sees it. This is also insane.